real quick for you this evening. What does it mean to speak truth to power? What does it mean to you? Truth to power. It's a phrase that has been tossed around a lot. The um, etymological history of the phrase goes all the way back to the Hebrew prophetic tradition. But in 2026, what does the phrase speak truth to power really mean? I kind of tossed this around in my head. I was at this community forum the other night, right down the street, and the subject matter was democracy at the intersection of America's 250th birthday coming up. And the panel discussion members, they were talking about what it means or how can common people work together to protect the vulnerable from what's happening in our country, aka the undermining of our democracy. And so things like cuts in USAID, cuts in healthcare, education, Medicaid, things of that nature, um, creating this crises, not only around the globe, but right here in America. And so the purpose of the roundtable was to ask who's speaking up, who's activating Romans 15:1. We then who are strong ought to bear the infirmities of the weak and not to please ourselves, because in essence, that's what speaking truth to power is somebody speaking up for somebody else, usually somebody in a position to do something, speaking up for someone not in a position to do something or as as much as what that person can do. And so it's a relevant question. And as I said, it's a question that I have been tossing around in my own head since I left that meeting because I'm not trying to be critical, but most of the commentary that I heard that night was basically just scriptures. And so I'm asking myself, is that all it means? Is that all that speaking truth to power is? And so I decided to delve into or to dive into, do a deep dive into that subject matter. And what I came up with was a, I guess you can call it a theology for speaking truth to power. Although speaking truth to power is its own theology, but if I were just to add my little 2 cents to it, I came across an article by the Washington Informer, which is a black-owned newspaper based in D.C. Goes back, it was founded in 1964, and it said, quote, black voters are signaling dissatisfaction, caution, and conditional readiness to act as the 2026 elections approach. In other words, black folk are getting ready to put the gloves on when it comes to the 2026 elections. But even more interestingly, the report goes on. The name of the report, by the way, if you want to look it up, is the state of black opposition and engagement in 2026. I actually posted an article, this same article that I'm speaking to you from on my website, pastorwrcrims.com. If you want to click on this link and read this report, it's quite interesting. One of the things that caught my attention was this quote, researchers divided the electorate, the black electorate, into three segments. Number one, defenders. These are people or voters already highly active in resistance activities and 98% certain to vote. Number two, activatables, which came in at 34%. And these are voters who recognize that issues they care about are under attack, but prioritize self-preservation over public action. In other words, these people, the activitables, are not, they're more prone to um, regard their own self-preservation as opposed to the preservation of democracy or the preservation of their own community. And then thirdly, the spectators category, which comprise 24%. And these people or voters, black voters, voters are less likely to see urgency in fighting back, and they are only 68% certain to vote. So just reading that article and those looking at those categories just kind of for me it upped the ante a little bit because I wanted to know more. Well, what is speaking truth to power? What is it really? And so I tried to answer that question in my own brain before I did research. And here's what I came up with. Speaking truth to power is to speak what is and not to gloss over it. It is to stand on behalf of the left out and the locked in. It is to point to specific instances of the abuse of power and demand that change had better be coming. It is to tell what God says versus what man says. It is to never flinch in the face of pushback or threats. And don't we have a lot of that today? It is to stand for something rather than to fall for anything. And lastly, it is to demand a timeline for justice, as Amos put it, to roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. So that's what I came up with just off the top of my head. But again, I wasn't satisfied. I wanted more. I wanted to know if there was more. And yes, there is more. Again, this phrase, speak truth to power, goes all the way back to the Hebrew prophetic tradition. But it has made its way into modern times. In fact, the phrase originated in modern times with Bayard Rustin, an American civil rights activist in the 1940s, who was a lieutenant to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And of course, Dr. King was the 20th century's most prolific proponent of speaking truth to power. Speaking truth to power does not come without a cost. Dietrich Bonhoeffer in Nazi Germany, and Dr. King in the U.S. were martyred for speaking truth to power. And we know that that list goes on and on. It's an endless list of people who have been martyred, who have been assassinated for speaking truth to power. But it was, as I said earlier, it was the classical prophets in the Hebrew Bible who galvanized the concept. Micah 6:8. Micah prophesied to both the northern and southern kingdoms, both of which had become filled with rampant injustices against the poor. One of the most famous or foremost architects of speaking truth to power was James Cone. He wrote a book among many, Speaking the Truth, Ecumenism, Liberation, and Black Theology. Cone constructed a contextual theology for treatment of systemic oppression. Darwin Adams writes of Cone, quote, at the heart of his methodology lies an inspirational ability to speak theological and cultural truths to empirical and colonial powers as the truth of God revealed to him. And then another non-African um, theologian or liberation theologian was Paulo Freire. His book, his seminal book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, explains how oppression has been justified and how it is reproduced through a mutual process between oppressor and oppressed. But Jesus Christ was the superlative example for speaking truth to power. And he did it in four ways. Number one, economic disruption by overthrowing the tables, as recorded by Matthew 21, 12 and 13, and Mark 11, 15 through 18. You see, the pilgrims, when they came to the temple, they had to use the currency of the day, which was Jewish as well as Roman, and they had to purchase sacrificial animals. And the money changers often charged them exorbitant rates in doing this. So they took advantage of these poor pilgrims by charging exorbitant rates or charging overinflated prices for sacrificial animals. Is that something that's going on? Exorbitant rates? Is that something that's going on today? Payday lenders, banks, other financial institutions. So, number one, economic. Number two, Jesus spoke truth to power religiously by railing against the legalism of the religious establishment. Matthew 23, 13 through 36. Number three, politically, he spoke truth to power politically, as demonstrated in his words to Pilate on the eve of crucifixion, when he advised Pilate that he would have no power except it were given by God. And then number four, Jesus spoke truth to power morally, as defined by the ethic of love your neighbor and do good to those who despise you. And that, of course, was the motivator or the activator for the civil rights movement, Dr. King specifically, the ethic of love your neighbor, the so-called beloved community. So Jesus thought or spoke truth to power economically, religiously, politically, and morally. And even in his prophetic and personal mission statement, Christ defines for us what speaking truth to power is. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, the recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are bruised. So in closing, Christ had seen the crippled. He had seen the poor, the handicapped, the frail, the broken, huddled against the masses of the impurely rich. But he chose to identify with the left out and the locked in, and he chose to challenge the systems that rob them of life. I can't think of a better answer to the question, what is speaking truth to power? To challenge the systems that rob men and women, boys and girls of life. Here's the question I asked earlier. Is it merely, is speaking truth to power merely quoting scripture? No. The Bible would suggest that speaking truth to power is not word only, but is reinforced by deed or action. Moses showed up at Pharaoh's court. The Hebrew prophets prophesied at the gates and courts of the city. John the Baptist dared to get into the face of imperialism. Christ did not shrink from his encounter with Pilate. Thus, speaking truth to power is actionable. What does it require? I'm glad you asked. It only requires that a person care about something to the degree that action must be taken. So the question really is, what do you care about? pick a problem and take a stand because there is no shortage of something to be concerned about. For me, many things, but in particular, black and brown boy reading scores. That's why I got on this mission to change it, to do what I can to inspire these young boys to develop a love for literacy, for books, for creativity, for imagination, because I could not accept that black and boy and cannot accept that black and boy reading proficiency scores trail white and Asian scores by 25 to 30 points. In conclusion, Jesus Christ is our redemptive hermeneutical principle when it comes to, to speaking truth to power. How will you measure up to the witness of Christ? So, what does speaking truth to power really means? It means what definition you bring to it. And in order for you to bring definition to it, you got to look outside of yourself and see what's happening because it's not about you, it's not about me, it's about something bigger than us. God bless you.